And at 10, the Bite of 83. The Bite of 83 is the inciting moment to FNAF 4. It's the reason the whole game is happening. Not the reason for the series as a whole, mind you, but considering how the main gameplay of this game is us having nightmare fever coma dreams, this bite is definitely an important one. And while yes, it's certainly disturbing to see on screen in 8-bit, I think it would be even worse to see it as a VHS tape. The realism that we would get from even like crappy footage is so bone-shaking that you can actually like feel as if you're in the situation. This whole genre of found footage really coming from the Blair Witch Project and its incredible marketing strategy. Like, I had a whole unit on marketing like this in college, okay? It's absolutely genius. And if that sort of style of cinematography was used to make like a whole FNAF movie, or even maybe just a couple of clips, we would all be sent screaming. And watching a kid get his skull crushed by an overpowered animatronic is definitely a shocking moment already. Also, did you know that only 17% of people who watch these videos are actually subscribed? You may not actually know that you're not subscribed, so be sure you check it. And if you aren't and you've watched this channel multiple times, click the button, okay? It makes me feel better about myself. In at 9, Bag of Rocks. Before Vanessa leaves Freddy in parts and service, okay, she says that it's so that his casing can be put on a new endo after they probably have someone on the clock who can do it normally. But, then after that, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around in front of her maybe within like 3 minutes. What? Who would have repaired him if not for, like, if it wasn't Gregory? There's literally no other human in the Pizzaplex, or at least that's alive at this point, and you know, Freddy can't really do it himself. The whole cylinder thing is to protect humans, there are no staff bots in this section, and the only reason that you had to leave him was because nobody else was working. Hello? You there, McFly? Like, why would Vanessa be so chill about Freddy just like walking around in front of her? She literally left him with his head removed, and now she's like, what, assuming that he somehow did it himself, which is literally impossible as he was strapped down? Even if he had done it himself, why wouldn't she see him and then confine him to his room, especially after just accusing him of helping to protect Gregory, okay? It's something that confuses me like so much, and I found it weird in my first playthrough, so I figured that if we got close to Vanessa, she would pull us out of Freddy, but like, I walked up to her to test it and nothing. She gave absolutely zero shits. Like, why? She's dumber than a bag of rocks at this point. It would have been so easy just to make like that little modification to her code for at least this part of the game, like making her a little bit more dangerous if she saw Freddy, but no, they didn't. In at 8, Princess Quest. The whole reason Princess Quest is a thing in this game was to lock Vanessa away in her brain and prevent her from regaining full control over her body. So why did William create or allow for the creation of a fail-safe in this system that allows her to escape? I mean, like, sure, they didn't expect a kid to come along and figure it out maybe, but first of all, it's an arcade machine, of course I'm gonna goddamn play it, but also given the track record of literally all of your plans, you'd think that Afton would have smartened up after like 40 years at the very least, but he doesn't, okay? It's like having a self-destruct button on the bomb that you plan to use to blow up Gotham City, okay? Or like it's like, I don't get it. It's like if the Joker had a purify water supply button just on him or something, okay? It's dumb. If you want something to work, why give it a way to fail? Or maybe that's just my brain and my perfectionism talking, but again, it's one of the dumbest things that Afton has actually ever done in the series. Like, canonically it doesn't backfire somehow, but that's aside the point. Like, but seriously, why would you have a way to undo your evil plans? A 4-year-old can do this. The fact that this wasn't the canon ending is actually just insane how that didn't happen. Just bury the third machine, at least, goddamn. Like, if that's the intention behind it, just bury it and leave it, okay? Fill it with concrete and leave it. Jeez. And at 7, stealing security badges. Not only is Gregory just a really weird kid in general who wears Fazbear merch but also doesn't know that Chica loves pizza, he's also a thief. This guy steals so many things from the Pizzaplex, not even including all the little gift boxes that you can find around that are only optional. He also steals the security badges and ends up getting enough to have level 7 clearance as like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or however old he is, okay? It's really unclear. Because like, he can't ride the go-kart alone, and he can fit inside of Freddy's chest cavity, but he can also speak full sentences with proper grammar and stuff, okay? I have no idea how old he actually is, but he is still able to gain level 7 clearance. But like, how are they so readily available for him to steal? And how is it that taking these badges always triggers some event that makes everything worse for him? Like, how are the security guards supposed to like use these badges if that's what happens every time they take it? Or, an even better question actually, how are these security badges laying around in special containers when security should just have their pass with their clearance level on it, like on their belt? Okay, I don't get it. Plus, how does gaining multiple level 1 passes end up adding up to a level 8 clearance? That's all, it's still all level 1, okay? I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's almost as if they set it up for him to see how long it would play out or something, or how well he would do. I don't know. And it's 6 fire. Okay, so during the true ending, otherwise known as the Afton ending or the Springtrap ending or whatever the hell you want to yell at me for not calling it ending, we have to fend off Springtrap's attempts to take control over Freddy by setting him on fire using what I'm guessing are the mechanisms that Henry uses to set the fire in FNAF 6, since this is the same location. However, it's incredibly convenient how we fall into the room that has all of this stuff in it, that it has the monitors set up connected to the cameras in the various rooms that Springtrap enters exclusively, with buttons that light the fires in the corresponding room that like has the camera on the monitor. Yeah, despite it being far more convenient for Henry to light all of them at the same time, I don't get how this works. Plus, I mean, like, if you think about it, how are these still working? It's clearly been a while, and some of the comments report that the Pizzaplex has been open for at least 4 years, which I don't know if it is accurate because, I mean, it's the YouTube comments. But if it is, these cameras and old-ass computers are still working 4 years after being set on fire that was enough to ruin the building. Not to mention also falling into a sinkhole that would have had to open up underneath it, since we have to travel down an elevator to actually get into this section of the pizza place. How is all of this still working after all of that? And if you say that it was Vanny, that even adds more questions, like why make sure the fire systems are working and then they're set to being separate buttons? Plus, why have the computer monitors set up to look at the right area? I don't get it. And how are these these computer monitors are literal dinosaurs. How did they work before the fire, let alone after it? This is the kind of thing that demonstrates the line between luck and intent, because there was no way this many things lined up for him, excluding plot armor, because we kind of need to ignore protagonist syndrome for this entire list. But still, if this was just happening, that would not happen. Never. No way. Halfway through into number 5, Ice Cold Captive. Gregory in the Faster Blast ending actually orders the robots to disassemble Vanny, since she just ordered them to disassemble Freddy. But like, disassembling a robot and a human are two very different things. Okay, trust me, I would know. I'm surprised the robots even listened to him. Adding on to that, the fact that Gregory is willing to kill Vanny here, it's pretty messed up, especially given that like most people assume that he's 10 or 11, which doesn't really seem to make sense. Either way, you could argue that he doesn't know any better, but clearly he does. Okay, this kid is able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation, use their upgrades on Freddy, he's willing to kill Vanny despite seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Springtrap multiple times to make sure he doesn't take over Freddy. Okay, what the living hell is this kid doing? Like, how was he raised? How is he so nonchalant about literally doing all of this? This guy kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to Freddy, who is destroyed. Dude, Vanny is bleeding out not 3 feet from you. She is torn to shreds and you're crying over a robot that can be fixed? Something isn't right about this kid. He's supposed to be the captive here, but he's the one putting everyone else in danger, I swear. In it for recharge. What's the deal with airplane food and Glamrock Freddy and needing to recharge every 5 minutes, okay? Like, in the game sense, time isn't moving when I'm running around for 5 hours, since I haven't actually progressed the story. So if this animatronic is supposed to need to recharge every hour only, why is this such an issue? And why does he only use power when we're actually piloting him like a mech? If this is the case, shouldn't this man also be losing power when we summon him to grab us from the 3rd basement floor? Like, what? Why not? And why does he need to recharge, but seemingly all the other animatronics don't? I never see Chica, Roxy, or Monty in a recharge station. Okay, even if you are around when they should be, when the hour hits. Okay, it's stupid, it's confusing, and it doesn't make any sense. It's almost like Freddy is doing this to us on purpose, either because he thinks that it's funny, or maybe he really is working for Vanny, but needs to gain our trust and make excuses for why he can't be around us all the time, so that he can just go and give her the information, or why he can't just why we can't hide inside of him all night, okay? There's something fishy going on with this animatronic, and I swear in the next game we're going to figure out that he betrayed us off screen. Or at least in the DLC we're gonna figure that out. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, the Afton ending. Okay, well, if you don't want to have the whole security breach game be a VHS, okay, how about the canon ending, or the Afton ending as some call it. The canon ending to this game is some of the most insane luck that Gregory experiences in his whole time at the Pizzaplex. This sort of thing is like catnip for these types of videos. I mean, when have you looked at one of these, or watched a found footage thing and thought, wow, this is so unlucky? Never. Okay, they always somehow end up having lucky thing after lucky thing happen to them. So let's take us falling into the room and then fighting off these robots. Just make it a damn VHS tape. Since honestly, trying to do the whole of Security Breach may be a little more ambitious than most people could reasonably expect, but that's just kind of the person I am, though. I end up thinking of cool things after cool things, so then I add them to the project, and then it inevitably becomes too ambitious that now it seems like a mountain I have to climb, so I give up. But then I also don't want to make the mountain smaller because all of these things would be so cool and I've already thought about them and want to include them. So yeah, it's happened with literally every project that I've had in mind, and it sucks. So how about this one, we just cut it down to the Afton ending? Is that better for anyone who can actually animate and do it properly? I hope so. Penultimately, in at number 2, the Claw. Elizabeth Afton getting grabbed by Baby is one of the most terrifying moments in the series. Possibly because Crying Child might have seen it, which would explain the mouths on the Nightmare animatronic stomachs. However, if we were to see a tape of this moment from Crying Child's perspective, whether that detail be canon or not, oh my frickin' god, that would be so utterly terrifying that we may actually, I might actually freeze, okay? I don't know how to explain why a kid hiding in the bushes while his sister is grabbed by an animatronic claw while trying to get ice cream would be so shocking and horrible, except for how I just did it. But especially considering that this kid ends up turning into an absolute psychopath after this, and by that I mean Elizabeth, not Crying Child, but still, okay? The found footage that's of someone hiding for some reason is always scarier than someone who's in the middle of the action, because I feel like if you're hiding, you can point the camera at the scene, but if you're filming it and you're in the action, you're just filming your feet as you run away, because you're focused on running away, not filming it. Plus, in general, this is just a f***ed up thing to watch happen, be it in person or on video. And finally, in at number 1, scoopening. Okay, now, I know that you may be mad and may think that this is a stupid point, but hear me out, okay? The scooper may seem like a weird but normal thing, at least by FNAF standards at first, but with the blueprint revealing how this thing actually works, seeing this in third person from found footage would be absolutely atrocious. This thing can inject whatever it ends up scooping with Remnant, which is a molten metal possessed by souls, and it keeps a person alive after removing their insides, replacing it with robot parts, and then having those robot parts leave that body. In essence, just making that person a walking case of flesh. Do you really want to watch that happen from a security camera? Or even just watch it happen to someone else, okay? No. In Sister Location, we see it in first person, okay? All we see is just basically a mighty machine digging into our body. But, from the outside looking at Michael, we would see so much more. And if it's from Ennard's perspective, it would only be worse. In at 10, to Rockstar Row. During the so-called interrogation and torture scene in Parts and Service, or at least that's what people are calling it, based on the titles of videos on YouTube, Vanessa questions Freddy about Gregory and accuses Freddy of helping us, which I mean is true, but she shouldn't even have to accuse him. More on that later. After telling him that she's gonna leave him down there until he can get put on a new endo, which doesn't really make sense if his coding is the issue and not the endoskeleton itself. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row through Roxy's lift? Why? When she could have easily just come our way and head into the main atrium. That's where Gregory is for the majority of the the game, and that's where all the animatronics are patrolling and have been spotting him. It would make more sense to go there than to Rockstar Row, where he was seen maybe twice at this point. Like, I don't know, it seems weird to me. I don't understand. Maybe like the whole logic behind this is that since all the animatronics are out in the atrium, she doesn't need to be there, or maybe she needs to be somewhere where she can get to her Vanny suit quickly, but I don't know. Even if it is Vanessa taking over and not like Glitch Trap at this point, I still don't get why she wouldn't just go to the atrium. And at 9, Springlocking. Along the same vein as the Bite of 83 tape scenario, a found footage video from one of the missing children's spirits' point of view would be absolutely insane. Just like Blair Witch, but make it FNAF, and that's in essence what the Springlocking is. Plus, I would love to get these things in more angles, especially the moment where William starts suffering for like the next 30 plus years, okay? That would make me happy. This man has caused me so much suffering that I hope I get to see him suffer even more, okay? This wouldn't even be a scary VHS tape for me, okay? I'm sure the sound of the Springlock when it actually happens would spook me in the moment, but it would be quickly washed away by pleasure, because this goddamn Mother Hubber would be suffering right there with me. And not like in a 50 Shades of I want people in pain kind of way, but more like seeing him suffer would make me smile, okay? I'm not gonna like hit up Chica afterwards or anything like that, but I'm definitely not gonna lose any sleep over it, you know? And at 8, March of the Toreadors. If you're confused by this number, don't worry, I'm going to explain it real quick. March of the Toreadors is the name of the song that plays when you run out of power in FNAF. It's the song that plays leading up to Freddy's jump scare. It's also slowed down for the games, and it's a song released by Georges Bizet, released in 1875, and from my understanding, now in the public domain. And while that's interesting, I mainly use the name to illustrate the part of the game that I'm talking about. Having a tape or a Blair Witch style video of you running out of power would be absolutely terrifying, okay? I can imagine it. And if it was made in a realistic way instead of being something like FNAF VR or otherwise with just like some filters thrown on top of it, if it was actually real, it would be terrifying. Okay, that's the kind of thing that would give people nightmares, and actual nightmares, not like the ones that I have where I just wake up panicking, then I'm like, oh wait, no, like actually scary. And at 7, Midnight Motorist. While the gameplay of Midnight Motorist itself is pretty simple, the intrigue comes from the hidden lore that we get from this game, all of which is fairly well known to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure everyone knows it, actually. You know how it's called later that night in the files, and the secret area at the bottom that leads to the whole other section with the Mustard Man and whatnot? Okay, good, glad we're caught up. So, imagine that whole Mustard Man minigame section as a VHS tape. That would be pretty damn freaky, right? I mean, like, especially given the location and the fact that this is a house alone in a clearing in the woods, okay? Very Blair Witch Until Dawn kind of location there, alright? And even if you want to just use the gameplay of the minigame itself, that's still pretty terrifying. And you know what? Maybe even more so. I've said this multiple times, but the idea that anyone we pass on the street could have just walked away from a gruesome murder is something that is, I think, at least, is one of the scariest realities we all face. Like, I've made jokes like you're only alive because every human you've seen has chosen not to kill you, and in reality that has way more truth to it than you would think. And this VHS tape would be like any other. But considering how later that night is commonly seen as later in the night William killed Charlotte, I think the implications of it would be pretty horrifying. And at 6, security breach. All of it. Considering how there are cameras all over the Pizzaplex that we are able to tap into somehow using our Fazwatch, I think it's fairly safe to say that this would be a realistic idea. And honestly, I think all the security breach moments could work as a tape. I mean, like, come on, okay? Especially when Vanny distorts the camera around her and makes herself invisible to Freddy, okay? An invisible psycho bunny out for blood, chasing a kid around a giant Chuck E. Cheese mall for 6 hours? Tell me that doesn't already sound like a horror movie. Especially when you throw in like the low quality video that is associated with old security cameras and VHS tapes, okay? Slap on top of that some well-placed static at intense moments, and boom, you have yourself the next Paranormal Activity series. I just think that the concept of security breach as a whole would do well with this style of video. But if you want me to be more specific, give me a minute and I will be. Halfway through into number 5, finding Springtrap. Now, this is a moment that we actually didn't get to see, but the guys who opened Fazbear's Fright in FNAF 3, they found Springtrap in that back room, right? So why not have a tape of them actually finding the body? That would be some freaky shit, man. Especially considering how we know exactly what happens because of this discovery. The pathetic fallacy of these guys not knowing what they've done, but everyone watching knowing what this leads to already creates a pretty damn compelling feeling. But then throw in the horror and the fact that we know it's William Afton Hartley clinging to life because he's stuck here until the one you should not have killed decides to let him go, and it just gets worse. But they also think that it's an animatronic that somehow just still works. So yeah, definitely something that would be an insane tape. Add to that the fact that we haven't actually seen this before, and I think we all love it. In at 4, Security Puppet. Another mini game from FNAF 6 that I think would make an incredible video, Security Puppet. And I mean like the whole finding Charlotte dead outside in the rain thing, not the whole do nothing until the final round because the green bracelet is stuck outside thing, okay? Because genuinely seeing this from the puppet's POV with like the green bracelet being highlighted and maybe even the only thing that is actually in color on the screen would make this so much more impactful, okay? The pain that the viewer would feel as we slowly crawl out to her bleeding body would be insane. And imagining like the sound effects of like faint screaming or like crying from Henry that we could also have in the background that gets slightly louder as we crawl, I'm actually getting chills right now. It doesn't even need to actually look realistic. You could do this in Source Filmmaker, and as long as the atmosphere is right and you have the sounds right and whatnot, it would be absolutely horrifying. Okay, I would hear those screams as I'm falling asleep, and I'd probably never be able to sleep again. Just saying. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Destruction. And isn't it convenient that there is a way to break every other animatronic that isn't Freddy? Okay, that leaves the animatronic broken in such a way that we can remove whatever aspect we actually needed to upgrade Freddy? Hell yeah it is. It's so convenient, in fact, that there is somehow a way to break them that just works perfectly for their personality, and the perfect amount of the animatronics as well. That works the first time. And even with Chica, okay, we push her into a goddamn trash compactor and somehow don't get crushed ourselves despite her grabbing onto us and pulling us with her. We only get pulled down into another area of the Pizzaplex that we can still get back to the Pizzaplex through, and you know, we weren't pulled into a thing that crushed our skulls. So yeah, needless to say that looking at this logically, it makes absolutely zero sense that any of this actually happened. Okay, we didn't even need to crush the animatronics, and instead we could have just chilled in Freddy's room until 6 AM when the doors opened. Ultimately, in at number 2, staying until 6. Speaking of which, Glamrock Freddy straight up encourages Gregory to risk his life in order to get out of the Pizzaplex, when in all honesty, the safest thing to do would have just been to keep him in your stomach or in your green room until 6 AM, especially after the door closes and he was definitely stuck, which just, it makes no sense whatsoever if Freddy is really meant to be protecting Gregory. There was no need for the whole daycare secret escape hatch thing. You could have just gone back the way you came and everything would have been fine. You wouldn't have been suspicious since you would have at least appeared to be like you listened to Vanessa after you saw her in the healing area and went actually back to your room, and then Gregory would have been safe, especially after you knew that there was some crazy bunny running around the pizza place looking to slaughter him. So yeah, if Glamrock Freddy is like supposed to be protecting him, he did a horrible job at protecting this kid. Okay, I don't understand. You can think of all the excuses you want for him, but if Gregory had just waited in Freddy's green room, everything would have been fine. That's it. That's period. And finally, in at number 1, probable betrayal. I know that nobody wants to believe me on this, okay? We all want to hold out hope that finally one of the animatronics is going to be good and trying to help us, but Glamrock Freddy, after everything on this list, is almost certainly evil and just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. We've made a whole video about that, okay? And now, honestly, this one is kind of about that too. This guy makes some hella sketchy choices throughout throughout our entire time at the Pizzaplex and only makes things worse for us. He takes us to get healed despite us saying no and having a limited time to leave, which ends up making us get locked inside the Pizzaplex. We also just sit in the booth and don't actually get healed, by the way, okay? He was unable to access the main Pizzaplex network despite having no reason to be disconnected, since at this point he wasn't suspected of helping us. And after Vanessa leaves Freddy without his head and parts in service, she sees him fully reassembled in less than 5 minutes and doesn't question it, like I said. Almost as if it was the plan the whole time. There's no way that he could have been put back together normally, and they just don't care, okay? The only way that this makes sense, any of this makes sense, is that if Freddy is secretly evil, and maybe even he doesn't know it. Maybe Afton is like in the back of his mind just like waiting to come forward.
Number 10. The Fate of Charlie. Through the minigames we have learned that the puppet is another animatronic possessed by a spirit. It seems that the puppet is actually possessed by the soul of Charlie, Henry's daughter. Although this is a little confusing if we're factoring in what we know of Charlie from the books to try and tie that into one timeline. But if we just ignore the timeline part of it for now, which with FNAF I think is usually best, Charlie was Henry's daughter, a strong and independent girl who was killed during a visit to Freddy's restaurant, trapped outside, possibly having an allergic reaction and tragically dying out in the rain. Her spirit then went into a nearby animatronic, which happened to be the puppet.
And its 7 true ending. The true ending of Security Breach is seemingly the scariest part of the game. This one is unlocked by finding the secret elevator in the section in Roxy's Raceway. It's down the stairs from where you find the test driver head. This requires your Freddy to have the Monty Claus and the Chica voice box, I guess. However, it is also possible that you can only get through it with the voice box if you like call Freddy to you. He can like appear on the other side of the gate and then smash through it because he's required to. But yeah, you have to do this after you stay to complete the game. You have to deal with a boss battle with one go, okay, without saving, so that's gonna be a pretty rough time since save states are disabled after you could have escaped. After making your way into Burntrap's area, Freddy will be taken over by Burntrap, and it's up to Gregory to defeat him using one of the 3 monitors and then pressing buttons to burn him. Players will also need to avoid the animatronic enemies that come for Gregory and use the doors to temporarily lock them out. When Springtrap is finally burnt for the final time, the blob, which was the whole tentacle monster thing, will attack him, making sure that he doesn't get free. At least, we hope that that's the case. Freddy and Gregory will be shown escaping and then sitting on a hill together, which is the first time a character has run away with an animatronic, and where an animatronic has not been a bad guy who ultimately betrays us in the end. So, yeah, that's significant, okay? Don't question me. And at 6, the one you should not have killed. The introduction of the one you should not have killed is probably the most confusing character ever. While we have had more confusing moments, the argument over who the one you should not have killed, aka the vengeful spirit isn't over. But no matter if it's Cassidy or Crying Child, the vengeful spirit was introduced as an explanation as to why Afton always comes back. A spirit that was possessing him and keeping him alive, which I called. I called that Afton was still living in the Springtrap suit, but all of you didn't believe me. And here we are. He was alive in the suit. And even after that, for some reason, you don't believe that I'm right about Crying Child being the one you should not have killed instead of Cassidy, despite my over like 350 different videos on FNAF. Okay, I feel like I know enough about this series, especially with the calls that I've made in the past. Okay, I was 1 day off on the Security Breach release date, 1 day, and you still don't think I know enough about this series. Come on, people, come on, just accept me as your overlord and this would all be so much easier. Halfway through into number 5, Dream Theory. The actual concept of dream theory is nothing new to any series, really. The idea that everything we've seen could just be a dream is possible with any form of media. But when it comes to FNAF, this idea made a lot of people upset, and I guess that's understandable. With everything being a dream, it in essence makes the lore worthless. So the hours and hours people spent trying to work it out being pointless if it was true. However, if this was the intention, we never knew, since in FNAF 4's ending we see a locked box with the now infamous line of perhaps some things are best left forgotten for now. And that for now has been around 6 years. Currently, according to Scott, from what I've seen, nobody has actually solved FNAF 4 yet, but then again, I don't think Scott knows who we are, so maybe I have and he just doesn't know it. But with the game surrounding a kid in a coma who's experiencing nightmares after getting chomped on by a seriously overpowered animatronic jaw, I think us getting the idea that this could be indicating that everything is a dream is a little on par for what the actual course was at that point. We were so invested at this point that we actually started scanning the source code, and again, found a real-world pizzeria thanks to the multiple 8s and 7s, and I still don't know if that was accidental or not. I don't think anyone does. I don't know if Scott actually knew about that or not. Maybe he was the one who put that on Google Maps. And at 4, soft reboot. The soft reboot the series is undergoing at the moment, and more so at the time that Help Wanted was released, was something that we had never seen before, well, at least in the FNAF series, and seemingly started the trend of characters from games becoming sentient and trying to escape the confines of games and come into the real world. That, you know, we see play out through the FNAF games after Afton becomes sentient code. But even then, the next game seems to throw that idea away while we're keeping what happened there, or at least in the mobile port canon with Princess Quest. It's a real issue, okay? The real issue comes from the next soft reboot they attempted to do in Security Breach again, with Afton now having a physical form. Again, his death being a mystery and the game setting up the next owner for wherever they want to go. And while I understand that, I wish you could have just like given it one path, you know, or like at least like just killed William off for us permanently. I'm still upset about that. Getting close to the end in number 3, Springtrap. Being the genius behind some of the most advanced robotic technology in his universe, we expect a lot from William Afton. He's the suit technician, but he's also the main killer. So, he should really know what he's doing, right? Well, apparently not. Since after discovering that the original 5 animatronics were possessed, he disassembles them to learn their secrets. This inadvertently releases the spirits of the original 5 victims, causing William to panic. Which is fairly reasonable, since firstly they're freaking ghost kids, and ghost kids are the scariest kind of ghost. And also because they're ghost kids that he killed. So this absolute animatronic genius, the mastermind behind everything, the technician that handles the suit maintenance and is explaining to every employee the proper procedure for the Springlock suits, including the spring bodysuit that he uses to kill, ends up climbing inside the suit in a panic in an attempt to make himself feel more powerful and maybe scare the ghost kids off. However, since he's so smart, he didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, the puddles on the floor, causing the Springlocks that were active at this moment since it was in suit mode to fail, which would have killed him had he not been possessed by the vengeful spirit. But I mean, without Springtrap, we don't have FNAF 3, and we don't have, like, literally any other game after that, so kind of important. And ultimately, in number 2, FNAF 4. Not only is the spring locking important, and on top of embarrassing, but the next game, FNAF 4, is one of the most pivotal moments in the series. After what Scott intended to be the original end to the series after 3 games, he came out with a 4th after the community was disappointed with the Springtrap jump scare. So lo and behold, we get the Nightmare animatronics, and the story of Crying Child, who still doesn't have an official name, since the N in Evan is a stretch and the whole Gregory thing is still up in the air. However, this kid really changed the way we looked at the series, from thinking that William was a grieving father to, after looking closely, that he instead designed these animatronics to kill, and the mysteries of this game. What's inside the box? Who's the one who says I will put you back together? And really, what does it mean? It's been like 6 years after the game's release, and we've still been unable to definitively answer those questions. And that's why the series has lived on for so long, okay? The amount of mystery and intrigue is just too much for us as humans to ignore. As humans, we want answers. It explains a lot about society. But let me tell you, those who don't worry about FNAF have it made. I guess ignorance is bliss. They don't have to do this.
Number 1. Glitch Trap. During FNAF VR Help Wanted, we learned about the fact that somehow William Afton was still able to survive through an animatronics chip being scanned into the Help Wanted game, used to help create realistic replicas of the old animatronics. Somehow, this allowed some part of Afton to manifest, becoming a malicious code that was unable to be deleted. Help Wanted is such a meta game. It's games and games, and these games, this is a game in the world, but it's also a game in our world. What's real? What's reality? I don't know. So, even though William Afton was burned down with the rest of the animatronics in Pizzeria Simulator, we learn in Help Wanted that he somehow has managed to survive, and has managed to even recruit someone to potentially aid him in escaping the confines of his digital prison. It's more than likely that we'll learn even more about Glitch Trap in FNAF 8 Security Breach.
And it's at hints. Once we started looking for lore hints and clues in more than just the games, we knew that we were going to be in for some extreme buffoonery with this series. I mean, like, looking in the game game files is one thing, okay? People do that all the time, especially for popular games. But once we had to start looking in the source code for Scott's different websites, and then everything that followed that, we knew that there was nowhere safe from his tricks. We learned multiple things thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files. We know that after Sister Location, Baby gets into a fight with the rest of Ennard and gets kicked off the island because of the source code. We got so many 8s and 7s before the release of FNAF 4 that we found a real-life pizza place on Google Maps, and we were looking so deep we ended up finding the original names to files to find the name of Vanny before it was even released. So yeah, needless to say, it's certainly been a wild ride since we saw those 8s and 7s in the source code, and then it only got more intense. Can't wait to see where this series goes with the hints next. Oh, probably just scrolling them on the inside of my eyelids. In 9, hiding spot. How the absolute living hell did anyone end up getting away with this? Like, the smell of rotting bodies inside of animatronics would ruin the atmosphere. The heat of the animatronics moving as well, that would just speed up the decomposition, and the animatronics are in front of people every single day. And they even started complaining that the animatronics were leaking blood and mucus and were, quote, smelling like death. If this was real, and William getting away with this wasn't important for the plot of life, he would have been cut instantly. Like, oh, we never found the bodies of these kids. How about we look in these leaking animatronics? Because, you know, they're leaking blood and mucus and smelling like death. Oh, wow, look at that. There's bodies here. We found those missing kids. Afton, you're under arrest. Boom. Like, instantly. I don't get how this wasn't an open and shut case. Like, straight up. He was so goddamn stupid. Like, he shouldn't have made it past the first game. His plan is a whole dumpster fire of bad ideas, but the entirety of the series would be different had he not hid the bodies in the animatronics. So, well played, I guess, William.
Number 8. Stitch Wraith. In the FNAF books, we have learned about the mysterious figure known as the Stitch Wraith, which sounds like it could resemble perhaps Ennard, but apparently is kind of its own thing. Stitch Wraith has yet to appear in the games, but is still horrifying and pretty important to the lore nonetheless. It was brought to life using the souls of 2 children combined with the powerful emotion of agony or suffering. In the Fazbear Fright books, it has shown up in each book, appearing during the end of each one of the stories there, and appears to be collecting haunted animatronics parts for what we can only imagine is some kind of dark and sinister reason. Of course, what we'd really like to know is to what purpose is Stitch Wraith amassing its collection. Number 7. The Fate of Elizabeth Afton. Sister Location in my mind was one of the biggest for lore moments because it just gave us so many important revelations. It and Pizzeria Simulator for me are really the standout games for lore moments. In Sister Location, it's implied and sort of revealed that William Afton had a daughter, Elizabeth. He made the animatronic circus Baby for his daughter, but apparently would not let Elizabeth play with Baby because he felt it was just too dangerous. This was likely because he'd made it to basically be a murder bot, or because he knew it just could be potentially dangerous and it could malfunction. I don't know why, of course, you'd make a murder bot for your daughter, but hey, I don't think any of us have ever thought William would stand a chance at winning any awards for parenting, am I right? Elizabeth manages to sneak away from her father and the other children, finding herself alone with Circus Baby, who, as expected, murders her, luring her with ice cream. Sweet, sweet ice cream. Elizabeth's soul then becomes trapped in Circus Baby, changing Baby's eye color from blue to green. Number 6. Michael Afton becomes Mike Schmidt. During Sister Location, you play as Elizabeth's brother, Michael Afton, aka Eggs Benedict, as you become nicknamed by the malfunctioning hand unit. In the Sister Location minigames and during the main game that is Sister Location, we learn of your fate as Michael Afton after you are scooped out by Ennard during the true ending. Ennard remains with you, but we later find out as Michael's exterior continues to rot as time goes on, Ennard eventually leaves Michael, being vomited up by him during the minigames where we see him become more and more rotten and eventually fully purple. Circus Baby, however, tells you even without any insides that you won't die, and somehow, miraculously, Mike Afton comes back to life. just like that. It's then theorized that Michael Afton after this point became Mike Schmidt, changing his name and becoming the other Michael that we come to know as the protagonist in FNAF 1. Number 5. Remnant. Considering that the revelation of the importance of Remnant was also attached to the scooper we saw used in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental in FNAF's sister location, the substance itself is involved in a pretty scary and important lore moment. Remnant also appears in Special Delivery and is used there to power up your animatronics, in a sense, giving them life. It seems to be the life essence of the animatronics in the games. Based on what we know from the games, this implies that Remnant is basically a soul or a collection of souls, but in the books it's even implied that Remnant could be created out of intense distilled emotions, such as primarily suffering and agony. Number 4. Serial Killer. Throughout FNAF 1, it's hinted that something awful happened at Freddy's. Well, actually, a lot of things that were awful happened at Freddy's, and it's later revealed that one of those awful things was a bunch of children that went missing. You later find out that these children didn't just go missing, but were murdered by none other than William Afton, dun dun dun, who is of course the inventor of these animatronics. Of course, we're still not sure exactly why William killed these kids, but the fact remains that he is the serial killer responsible, and it's even believed that helping to create the franchise and its animatronics was his own crazy way of creating his own horrific killing ground. Number 3. Springtrap. One of the more shocking reveals was when we find out the fate of William Afton following the murders. He returned to Freddy's planning to dismantle the animatronics he'd built, but the spirits of the children he had murdered returned, hell-bent on getting their revenge. Terrified, William ran away and found the faulty Spring Bonnie model to hide in, knowing that the animatronics would not recognize him as a threat if he was also hiding in an animatronic suit. This part of his plan of course worked out, but due to William laughing at the thought of his own victory, which really he probably should have waited until the animatronics were gone, and due to water leaking onto the spring locks, the locks gave way, impaling William and killing him within the suit. His own soul then became trapped within that suit, as did his corpse, giving us the terrifying antagonist for FNAF 3, Spring Bonnie, the only animatronic in that game who could actually kill you, because all the other ones were just hallucinations or ghosts. Number 2. Freeing the souls. At the end of Pizzeria Simulator, we learned that we have unknowingly been running the pizzeria for a greater purpose that was previously unknown to us. Our boss, who we suspect to be Henry, which was William Afton's partner, has hired us, Michael Afton, as the manager of this pizzeria so that we would lure in all the evil and possessed animatronics. Once all gathered, our boss reveals that now it's time to end the cycle of bloodshed and let go and move on from the tragedies tied to Freddy's franchise. He urges the animatronics there, including a version of Circus Baby and William Afton's Springtrap, to be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. Thus seemingly ending the murderous rampage of so many villains that we'd known, and in theory ending his own life as he is nearby, and the life of you, the manager, Michael Afton, when he burns the pizzeria to the ground.
And finally, into number 1, live stream. After MatPat's big FNAF 4 theory relating to dream theory and how the entire series might be a dream, something later disproven by Scott, so thank God for that, there was still a series of cryptic messages that made us think a whole load of crazy for a while. And you know what? Maybe we were right at the time, but as the series grows, so does the story. It's like a living organism adapting to changes in its environment. Why would Toy Chica be missing her beak? And 4 games, 1 story could have made sense back then, but now we're not entirely sure if they have an impact anymore, since it's definitely more than 4 games. At the time, we thought that this meant that Crying Child was Michael Afton, something that honestly kind of made sense, in the weird FNAF way of making sense. But now, we've decided that it's not the case, and honestly, I think that this is the way the series will stay. Not about the Mike thing per se, but specifically that we will never know what's really going on, and that the story will instead be what we as fans make it instead of what Scott might have originally intended. Sure, he can help gesture us in a better direction that would make more sense with what he wanted and what he has planned, but I don't think that we'll ever know what Scott originally thought the story of the series would be. Hence why when Dawko asked him which FNAF 3 ending was canon, Scott said he wouldn't answer. And at 10, the discovery of Remnant. The discovery of Remnant is only really described to us in the original novel series, with William learning about the souls of the missing children being basically infused into the endoskeletons of the original 5 animatronics. He melts them down to make the fun times, but this is when his goal changes. Originally, he, from what we can tell with our limited information, was just killing for the sake of it, However, now he had a purpose. He wanted to find the key to eternal life, to immortality, whether it be to bring maybe an extra child back, or to keep himself in the land of the living. The moment William discovered Remnant, he totally changed his game plan. However, that's the importance to the FNAF story. To us, it could be when we discovered how Remnant was made in the Fazbear Frights books, when Dr. Phineas Taggart discovered that agony was the most powerful human emotion, and that the act of possessing something in the FNAF world was just your extreme agony latching onto a nearby object, which explains why it happened to the children, and then to William, which I'll talk about later on. And a 9 missing children's incident. The missing children's incident is really what started the FNAF series. It's also a tongue twister. It's a mystery that we all gravitated towards when we started looking into the first game, and it's the incident that really popularized the series, aside from it being terrifying. The incident has gone down in history as one of the scariest and most convoluted things in recent years, with whole threads being dedicated to why or how it happened, along with how William got away with it, since the suits were literally leaking body fluids like a rotting corpse would, and no one checked them out. It's incredible how far the series has come from just that one moment, and it being the catalyst for everything else. That makes it pretty important and very deserving of our number 9 spot. And before we get any further, if you're enjoying this video or just like the FNAF content in general, be sure you're hitting that like button on this one and all the videos to come. It really helps us out and it lets us know what you want to see more of. And at 7, Scooping 2, Electric Boogaloo. Michael's scooping, however, defined the next parts of the series as a whole. We learn that he's working to right his father's wrongs, and we think that he's been doing it the whole time, even though it could have been Henry. Check the link in the iCard for the theory on that. But Michael's scooping was different. Instead of him dying, we see him get filled with Ennard and then used as a skin suit to walk around in the world. We see his skin rot or bruise as it turns purple, drawing enough attention that Ennard thinks it's a better idea to roam the sewers as a mess of animatronic parts. But then he lets us know that he's coming after his father, so much so that once he traps him in Pizzeria Simulator, he stays there to make sure the deed is done, but it's not, and Michael gave his life in order for his father's reign of terror to end. But is this the last time we've seen Michael, or is always coming back hereditary? Only time will tell. Maybe reincarnation is a thing in the FNAF series. It very well could be. Scott's just pulling things out at this point. Getting close to the end in number 3, FNAF 6. FNAF 6 is another one of those ending sequences, where the series looks like it could have ended, and while slightly more convoluted, it would have been okay. We would have hammered out the rest eventually. The FNAF 6 ending, though, was indeed the end of multiple animatronics. Elizabeth, Charlotte, and Ennard were all released in the FNAF fire, as well as Michael, who stays to burn, and Henry, who stayed so nobody would remember this place or this story. However, we know one escaped. Springtrap, or Scrap Trap, William Afton himself, managing to evade death once again, and it wouldn't be until later where we found out and understood how, and yet we figured he would be back. He always comes back, and now, with nobody to stand against him, he's free to do whatever he wants. Henry isn't fighting him, Michael isn't fighting him, they both thought he would burn, but he's free, as well as free as he can be while being stuck inside a video game world. For now. Penultimately in number 2, The Man in Room 1280. While plenty of people brush these books off as just books, the story of The Man in Room 1280 is one of the most important pieces of lore we have gotten from this series. It answers a question that we've all had since FNAF 3. How does William keep surviving? How does he always come back? And while it may seem minuscule, this is the biggest hint that we've gotten in ages. Learning that William was possessed by the spirit of one of his victims explains more in the series than any Easter egg Scott had left us. I don't care that Funtime Foxy can mimic voices, or how the Scooper can inject a remnant. It mattered how William's signature line of "I always come back" is true, and this book delivered. It also explains how he came to possess a hard drive that got scanned into Help Wanted. It explains that since he was possessed, he was alive in FNAF 3, and that explains how he survived the fire in both FNAF 3 and FNAF 6. It showed us that everyone knows what he did despite not being convicted. It provided so much for us, and that makes it the most important piece of confirmed lore that we have. There is one moment that is more important, but we have nothing on it at the time of this recording. And that point is, finally, in number 1, the breaking point. The breaking point in this scenario is referring to the moment William started killing. We don't know when it was, we don't know why it was. To us, it's just always been a thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was an incident before that of the missing children's from the first game that was just his first kill. we don't know what drove him into killing, and there's no way that would have been the first, right? Nothing has been confirmed or even presented in the games. There are hypotheses that it was due to his wife or lover dying, perhaps due to childbirth, or that it was because one of his children died, but we know that can't be true unless he had another kid that we haven't seen, because he had designed animatronics to kill before his children died. There were really no indicators as to why he started on his mass killing spree. It could just be that he's insane and wanted to do it, or maybe he wanted to unlock the mysteries of life, or maybe it was just an accident the first time but then he got a taste for it. We don't know, and we don't even have any evidence to go off, so all of this is just hypothesis and guesswork. It can't even really be educated guesswork because we don't know enough about Afton himself to make a real connection. Like, we don't understand him as a person, if you kind of get what I'm saying. We know parts of his story, but we don't know what's in his brain, and that's what we would need to make an educated guess, at least from the crime shows I've watched.
In at 10, Devin. The story, The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular. You know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives, they try to make a new friend, despite Kelsey being incredibly charismatic and adored by everyone in the school. Over time, Devin grows jealous of Kelsey since, you know, he has everything that he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an effort to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure him to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours. To try and maybe, like, humble him, I guess. I don't know what the plan was here. But the plan, whatever it ended up being, goes incredibly wrong. After getting in the Springlock suit, it fails, as expected, because, you know, it's a FNAF book, causing blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and, you know what happens when a Springlock fails. So, yeah. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime like the idiot that he is, sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth to try to find a body, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again because for some reason someone reset them, and as per usual, Devin gets his hand stuck inside the machine and bleeds out, but not before seeing black hair in the suit. Instead of blonde hair. Would you want to be spring-locked? Hopefully you said no, but whatever you answered, the opposite will happen unless you like this video, okay? You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, thank you. See, there you go. Now you will either be spared or not, depending on your life choices and probably previous trauma. Let's keep going. In at 9, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game, but if I say which fan game, it will spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to the next number, okay? I'll give you a chance to do that. Alright, now that you've prepared for the spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznom on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018, and it was made by the same guy who's currently working on FNAF Plus, so you know it's going to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point and click and a free roaming horror game. So you click and it's flat. The player ends up waking up to find themselves with no memories and a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving the 5 nights. The player is given different tasks and then you have to complete them before 6 a.m. and then getting out of the establishment. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and being left to rot, meaning that you're a Springlock victim, and I don't like that. So yeah, number 9. In at 8, Springtrap. Well, yes, technically Springtrap themselves isn't a Springlock victim, it's the most recent form of our main antagonist, and you know what, I want to hate on him real quick. Like, what is this man's problem? What is with this full-on Harvey Dent knockoff and is somehow still living ass and trying to take control of Freddy, okay? Like, what does that even do for him? Sure, he can use Freddy to get to us, but this man is also just at the end of the hall, okay? He can just crawl through the vent like Monty does, and then you'd be able to get to us. Even if we, like, close the vent, we can't have it closed forever. That's why there's a power bar next to it. So why couldn't you just wait it out and then tear Gregory to shreds yourself, you pansy? Come on, stop having your minions do everything for you. Where's the William Afton that everyone was scared of, huh? Like, that little Springlock gang made you that much of a little bitch? Like, come on, dude. Hey, you're a grown man, and I'm the size of a 4-year-old. Why are you so scared? Because of the robot that's running on low power after glitching out? He should be on bed rest, not trying to help a kid, okay? He can't even take on multiple staff bots. Have your minions take Freddy and then deal with me yourself, okay? You say you always come back, but apparently, every time you do, it's as just that little bit more of a pussy, okay? Springtrap, more like just
Burn. And at 7, Cassidy. Some say that Cassidy was spring-locked, but honestly, there isn't really much evidence for that. But you know what? If she wasn't, she damn well deserves to be. And why, you ask? How could a little girl who got killed and then go on to possess the killer so he could suffer for all eternity deserve such a fate as a spring-locking? Well, exactly for the reason you listed. Because everyone thinks that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, aka the one who possesses Afton to make him suffer. But when you look at it logically, taking into consideration more than just what Matt Patton says, it would make more sense for Crying Child to be the vengeful spirit. But nobody wants to listen to me. Nobody wants to hear even my suggestions because of Cassidy. The amount of hate that I have gotten in the comments, in my DMs, on TikTok for God's sakes, is more than I have gotten for anything else. Even more than I got for suggesting that Michael was a Crying Child robot. Just because William didn't kill Crying Child directly does not mean that he couldn't possibly blame the man who made the robot and gave it enough power to crush a skull for his death. Because, you know, that wouldn't normally be required. Plus, Cassidy only has significance because you think she's the vengeful spirit. Take that away, and what importance does she have? Exactly. So, just for that, and for hardly anyone being willing to even hear me out, Cassidy damn well deserves it. Honestly, she could be higher on the list, but I wanted to rant about other people a little bit more. So yeah, there you go. And at 6, William Afton again. I say again, even though technically Springtrap was on the list already, but also some may not consider that the same thing. But what I mean is, in the context of this number, it makes sense, okay? Could William have suffered a springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring Bonnie suits like we see in FNAF 3? You know what? It's possible. And it explains why I said again. It certainly appears that way in the FNAF novels, because William is described as having scars that are consistent with the springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? I doubt it. The reason we think it could be possible is because we hear of an incident at a sister location that has multiple and simultaneous springlock failures, so maybe that could have been William, okay? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would definitely get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But then, considering how he kept using the suit afterwards, I doubt it, because, you know, trauma, but again, he's a psychopath, so. Halfway through in at number 5, liability. The springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way with enough room for a human to fit inside is insane, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge, giant metal death boxes, so maybe we can't really complain. While yes, they do have their faults, there's nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and human suit. It's an incredible feat of technology, even if just absolutely the dumbest idea ever. Because it's terrifying for the same reasons that it would be in game. Someone can dress in it and pretend to be a robot, okay? It can clamp down on you in any second, and it has done so multiple times before. The springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they did not need to end up creating, but like, I don't know, like these things are so hella deadly. Why would both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them? Especially Henry, like goddamn. Just make a separate suit for the animatronic, okay? Like make a separate suit that your employee can wear. It's the employees, the people who run your business. They make you money, so that, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic bits replacing their, you know, normal human organic bits in a hot suit that fails when it gets moist. You know, sweat, breathing. Yeah, I would never get in one of those things. Even if there hadn't been an incident before, okay, that just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I don't want to be the one whose family sues because I'm too dead to do it myself, alright? So, no. It's a myth that they shouldn't have gotten sued. In at 4, shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first springlock victims, and this comes to us after FNAF 3's phone guide dialogue that mentions multiple and simultaneous springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple springlock suits failing at once instead of multiple springlock mechanisms within one suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous springlock failures could mean either multiple of the springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one springlock suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the springlock suits, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are versions of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics who do have springlock suits, but I'm pretty sure this was disproven by Scott at some point, or at least he mentioned that it was wrong. Sorry, there are also multiple holes with the theory, but anyways, shadow animatronics still pretty cool. Getting close to the end, into number 3, Gregory. The way I see it, Gregory is such a stuck-up little shit that he would absolutely deserve to be crushed by metal robotic bits being put in the same places as Bones, because this kid is just a damn menace that seemingly doesn't want to take responsibility for any of his actions. And you know what? None of you hold him accountable either. Gregory orders the robots to disassemble Vanny. Quote, okay? Gregory being willing to kill Vanny is already pretty messed up, but while some would argue self-defense, this is not self-defense. Self-defense requires a reasonable amount of force to be used, okay? Tearing a person limb from limb is not reasonable force. This kid is easily able to destroy all 3 animatronics without a moment's hesitation and then use their upgrades on Freddy. He is willing to kill Vanny, like I said, despite actually seemingly knowing her like we see in the best ending, and then he burns Springtrap multiple times in an attempt to stop him from taking control over Freddy, but again, he's also just setting fire to this thing all the time. So like, what the absolute living hell is this kid doing? And how is he so nonchalant about this whole thing? Okay, this guy literally kills Vanny and then only gets emotional when he has to go talk to a destroyed Freddy robot that they can remake. Dude, Vanny's literally bleeding out right next to you. I'm sure that her ribs are just splayed across the floor. Dude, couldn't you have just said like stop Vanny or restrain Vanny? Stop Vanny would have been the easiest one, not freaking disassemble. Okay, you're not panicking about literally anything else in this game. Okay, just say something that doesn't involve a human dying, for God's sakes, okay? Stop Vanny, like, dude. But ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I'm pretty sure we all know this story by now. There we go. Finally, I'm kidding. Everything was going well at first, okay? They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, but once William Afton discovered Remnant, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room so that he can access and dismantle them, and then using their endoskeletons to melt them down and make some soul-infused metal BS. However, by doing this, he releases the souls of his own victims, and you know, he gets reasonably scared, so he crawls inside of his spring bodysuit, trying to make himself feel more powerful, and then he gets killed. And yeah, and then he's in agony for 30 years, and that's, you know what, he deserved it. He deserved it. I mean, he doesn't die from it, but he definitely deserved to be in pain. And you know what, that makes him deserving of the number 2 slot, alright? And finally, in at number 1, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. However, one day, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could be either because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they just had to advance the plot. I don't know. I haven't read the original novels, and at this point I don't really want to. However, looking at the wounds, she can confirm that they are in fact from a Springlock failure, despite some not having any actual experience with forensics. But that means that we do have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel, and if this character does have a name, please let me know in the comments because I can't find one online. However, I also had to kind of rush to get this list, so maybe I didn't look enough. Who knows? It might have been William, it might not have been, I don't know. And there was also fake blood, and they realized that Afton faked everything so that he couldn't be caught as a serial killer. I don't know, okay? It's stupid. William needs to die. Stop bringing him back. This is like a show like Criminal Minds, bringing a serial killer back after giving him a lethal injection for the 4th time. Okay, I don't get it. Stop doing it. And at 10 times the charm. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see happen in FNAF 3? In a way, it's possible, and it appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described as having scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location? So is that unfortunate incident actually William? There are plenty of other people that it could be as well, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But with William continuing to use the suits afterwards and putting it on, like we hear in FNAF 3, and then again he ends up failing in FNAF 3 as well, it's unlikely, so no. In at 8, Elizabeth Afton. I've seen a few people asking if or assuming that Elizabeth Afton was a victim of a Springlock failure, and the truth is, she wasn't. The circus baby animatronic isn't a Springlock suit, since a Springlock suit in this case is defined as a suit that contains robotic parts, but uses a special mechanism that when cranked moves those robotic parts to the side so that a person can climb inside and wear the robot like a suit. The baby animatronic isn't one of those, because there's no way to actually wear this animatronic. Baby it's just a robot, so there is no way that she could have Springlocked Elizabeth. Elizabeth is just a normal victim of her father's killing spree, which resulted in her somehow wanting to make him proud, despite him being the reason she's dead. Directly. Like, not even an, he just because he made the animatronic thing. No. Nobody else had a hand in her death aside from him. But she still wants to make him proud. I don't know. I guess baby crushed her body and then her sanity too. Which, I mean, I'd understand. That's pretty rough. And it's 7, Fredtrap. Fredtrap is exactly what you'd expect. It's Springtrap on a yellow Freddy animatronic, okay? The designs are actually scarier than normal Springtrap to me, and I guess maybe it's because bears are scarier than bunnies in general. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how Scott himself was scared of Bonnie, but that's just idle speculation. I also think that originally William was planning on using the Fredbear suit, hence its superpowered jaw, but after Crying Child bit the dust, pun intended, he decided to use the Bonnie suit instead, since, you know, thanks to Elizabeth, he knew that Crying Child might be possessing Fredbear. But he wasn't, okay, and that's also idle speculation, but anyways, it's speculation from a DM who tells stories and knows how to story build, so maybe I'm onto something here. But anyway, there are still more rundown versions of also scrap versions of Fredtrap, which are already terrifying. And it's 6, Unintentional. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions by William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that is not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby at the very least, we know that these were made in order to kill. We know that was a thought in his brain, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to think that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. More on one of them in a minute, but honestly, if William made the fun times with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks. And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal bars, cogs, gears, and more into the same place your body would take up, it was made with pure intentions, then you need therapy more than I do, okay? I have some numbers you can call. Especially when a normal animatronic and then a suit for your employees would be cheaper and less likely the focus of a lawsuit. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, William Afton. William is at number 5 because, well, he absolutely did deserve to be a Springlock victim, but he also actually was, and seemingly is the only one who actually was on this list. But like, for real, this man deserved what he got in more ways than one. Seriously, he was a mass murderer who would have gotten a lethal injection anyway, but also the technician that made the suits, the man that handles the suit maintenance on the daily, and is absolutely explained to every single employee that has put one of these fuckers on the proper procedure for the Springlock suits. Mostly for tax and liability reasons, probably, okay? But including the Spring Bonnie suit that he uses to kill people, okay? Then he gets inside one without thinking and somehow doesn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, causing the Springlocks that were active at this moment to fail and just fill him full of metal, okay? But like, it's your building, my guy. How are you not painfully aware of the leaking ceiling in this back room? Really, like how? How do you not know? Seriously, somehow this lucky motherfucker managed to get possessed by someone that he killed who was so pissed at him that they kept him alive for all of his other supposed to be deaths. Because they wanted William to suffer. Like, god damn it. No matter who it is, whether you believe it was Crying Child or Cassidy, despite there being a more logical conclusion when you don't just blindly listen to MatPat, like, why? Why couldn't you just let him die? I get that you want him to suffer, okay, obviously. I mean, I put him on this list. I wanted him to be Springlocked. But like, doing that results in him killing more people. So why? Why would you do that? Getting close to the end, in number 3, Garvey. a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras for Domitibus, okay? The game from which he is the penultimate antagonist of. As a human, he was the man who killed the missing children and then later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burned to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, which is where the two timelines start to separate. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3, obviously. However, it's not actually William Afton, since the game was released before the name reveal and even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to freaking call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon spider monkey from the deepest pits of hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand how this thing wants to operate, but honestly, I don't want to know, okay? This creation is a monstrosity that haunts my nightmares, and it's haunting my nightmares even more so than all my actual real-world trauma combined. So, I don't know, okay? Maybe Garvey's just there more because it's just, like, at this point, my mental health has gotten to the point where he's basically a visual representation of my damage. But either way, it's terrifying. But ultimately, in number 2, Springlocks are real. Okay, you see, if I was to actually do, like, a cosplay of the purple guy and actually do it without it being a joke, I'd probably end up using a purple phone case, because, you know, I gotta reference the phone guy. But I don't need a Springlock crank, because those aren't actually a thing in real life. While the term Springlock is used in real life, it is a totally different mechanism from the actual FNAF thing, okay? I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from the Springlocks and You How Not to Die remastered thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs. From my research, what I gathered was that a springlock in real life is in the simplest of terms if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real Springlocks just simply brings you back to that page or quotes that page, so there's really only one source. Springlocks, as they're used in the games, do not exist in real life. Alright, that is a myth. The term is used, but it's two separate words instead of one, and they mean totally different things. So please stop. In at 9, Mr. Hippo. Okay, this is kind of a joke number, but also not, because Mr. Hippo is literally the worst thing ever in Ultimate Custom Night. Mr. Hippo is a viable animatronic from FNAF 6 that returns as an antagonist in Ultimate Custom Night. Okay, Mr. Hippo will climb through the duct systems trying to reach one of the 2 hoses in the office. Hoses? Is that right? I don't know. I just copied and pasted that line from the wiki. The player needs to use an audio lure to keep him in place and to move him around so that they can use the heater to push him back, and he is fooled 100% of the time by the audio lure. Also is fooled faster than Helpy Frog. However, most of the scare factor from this animatronic doesn't come from their behavior or their design. This time around, rather, their death lines. Cause you see, Mr. Hippo has a knack for going on about things. A lot. Okay, it's like me on a first date. Still, he will go into like 5-minute long speeches that you have to deal with every time he kills you. Meaning that if you get jump scared, you're boned for enough time to make a sandwich, okay? Which is annoying as hell. Getting killed by him enough will eventually cause you to end up agreeing with me that he needs to be springlocked. Because you end up knowing what comes after the smoke of the jump scare clears, and it's just pain. In at 8, Roxy. Okay, I know that Roxy and Mr. Hippo are animatronics and incapable of actually feeling pain because of a spring locking, but honestly, I also just hate this kind of person. The self-centered tool bag who only cares about themselves, whether they secretly hate themselves or not. That's not what matters here, okay? Who you are and what kind of person you are is defined by how you treat others and who you are when the pressure is on. And Roxy is just horrible. And while they may not be able to feel pain from the spring locking, at least Roxy will be contained if they got spring locked, okay? And honestly, that's what I need. I don't want to deal with this personality type. I've dealt with enough people like this throughout my life, and I'm still only 22 goddamn years old, which means that I'm really fed up with this shit. So yeah, there's not much else to say with this one other than I want her to be restrained so that I don't have to deal with her. So yeah, that's it. That's the number. What are you still doing here? Go to the next one. And it's 7, Kelsey. The New Kid from 1:35 a.m. is a story from 3rd Fazbear Frights book. The story revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts. They aren't really popular, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they try to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time Devin grows jealous of Kelsey because, he's adored and loved by everyone in the school. So, in an act of revenge, or to maybe try to gain control over him, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. I guess to try to humble him, I guess? I don't know why you thought that this would be a good thing, but obviously the plan goes horribly wrong because it's a FNAF book. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks ended up failing, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, causing all of the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth because he doesn't think about fingerprints, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out. But not before seeing a body in the suit, with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. I don't know, okay? Could this be a character that we have yet to see in the games? Probably not. It's just a character in the book, alright? This doesn't happen in the games, okay? It's a myth. This is just a book thing, okay? Stop. In at 6, FNAF Cops. The cops in the FNAF universe are absolutely the most moronic bunch of people I have ever, I guess, not seen but heard of, honestly. Like, yeah, I get that they couldn't catch William for story purposes, but that seemingly was retconned, since in the first game they said that they had made an arrest. They could have ended it right there. The story could have been over, but they couldn't find the bodies, so they let him go. Yeah, ignore the animatronics that smell like death, are leaking blood and other bodily fluids, and that many parents have compared to reanimated corpses. Those don't have anything to do with this scenario. Yeah, totally. And even when they find baby's blueprints and see that she has a child storage tank, they don't do anything more than question him. Quote, "There's no doubting what you've achieved on a technical level. These are clearly state of the art. There are just certain design choices that were made for these robots that we don't fully understand. We were hoping that you could shed some light on those." Dude, arrest him! And search the bloody, rotten body smelling animatronics. God damn it, how hard is this? Okay, if it's a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, come on, if it's a crime scene, you don't need to have a warrant, for fuck's sakes, okay? They all deserve spring lockings for the sheer stupidity alone. I'm surprised that they didn't crawl into one and then get killed by it just because they're that damn stupid. Halfway through in at number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3, Nightmares Awoken. Unlike the others, she's not a Reaper animatronic, which is a good thing because Jesus Christ, those things are horrifying. But Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit posters in the Night 3 cutscenes, but her faceplates are very hard to spot, and she's almost entirely purple. Purple, you know that, purple! The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse, because of course it does. She lacks a bib. She's very slim, like Toy Chica, luckily, except for the hips, which appear to be much wider because, she's got to give birth to those dummy thick Chica babies. And it's also revealed that Grim Chica is a Springlock in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing." I don't get it, man. Like, why? Why would you do this to Chica? I put this on the list instead of Grim Freddy because, well, I mean, like, it's Chica, okay? And look at what they did to my girl. Okay, well, look at how they massacred my girl Chica. Alright, it's rude. In at 4, Vanessa. I feel like this one is kind of obvious, and you may get mad at me for saying this, but Vanessa deserves to be Springlocked, man, okay? You're probably thinking, but she's possessed, you moron. She doesn't have control over her actions. But that's the thing. She does. Vanessa has no willpower to sacrifice herself for the greater good, okay? At this point, I think that it's safe to infer that Jeremy from FNAF VR didn't go crazy because he just saw a glitch trap. It's fairly reasonable to say that he got possessed. Tape Girl hadn't broken glitch trap into the tapes yet, and he was probably just able to possess whoever he wanted. So if Jeremy did get possessed, and the possession worked in a similar way that it does with Vanessa, which would make sense, Jeremy would at times be sentient and in control of his own body. So if he knew about glitch trap, maybe he didn't cut his face off because he was freaking out like he had just taken like the Epsom salt because you use it in the bath. Maybe he did it to try and kill the monster that was inside of him. time, okay? So if Vanessa had the gall, Afton wouldn't really have a vessel, okay? Especially since the VR game at this point was probably abandoned. But she won't. But she won't do it. So she deserves to be Springlock. Getting close to the end of number 3, not beefed up. The fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an insane thing that nobody really seems to grasp. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, something that we've covered how crazy is. Imagine if that was an employee, okay? Like ignoring the fact that you think it's a Springlock incident or that it's a Springlock suit, the amount of power that Jaw has is a hazard for everyone who comes into contact with it. Like goddamn. And before you say anything, okay, it wasn't a Springlock failure. I don't know how many times I need to go over that. There's no Springlocks in the mouth, and they weren't active at the time. Okay? It can't be a Springlock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful animatronics, alright? Which would be explained by them being intended to kill, which also explains why it would have the power to crush crying child's skull. The way I see it, William probably wanted to use the Fredbear suit as his kill suit because, you know, Freddy's the more popular character, but then he had to change to Bonnie after, you know, his son was killed in the suit, especially considering how he saw Elizabeth end up possessing Baby, so he was probably worried that Crying Child did the same with Fredbear, so yeah, that's the way I see it. Penultimately, in number 2, Henry. Yes, I'm going to continue the Henry hate train. Choo choo, get on board, motherfucker. Because despite how many people try and defend him, I will never stand down. I don't get what Henry's deal is, because he does not kill William at any point in the series, aside from trying to make it look like a fire did it. But William is already considered dead. How would you killing him make things suspicious? So why would you try to cover it up with a fire? For some reason, okay, he seems to be fine offing William's son when he gets the chance though. I mean, in both of the fires that Henry has set that we see, FNAF 3 and FNAF 6, Michael was there both times. And he didn't seem to care that Michael was in the building either time, okay? He doesn't even give Michael the opportunity to leave in FNAF 6 despite there having been a way out planned. Quote from Henry's final speech: "And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be." You have a feeling? What are you, the black eye frickin' peas? He assumes that we also want to die in these halls, but doesn't give us the chance to actually make that decision for ourselves. He just forces us to die, since he doesn't give us a way out. Okay? That's murder! Whether we wanted it or not. Okay, assisted suicide is still illegal in the majority of states, I'm pretty sure, okay? But even then, not giving us the choice, even just assuming that we want it, makes it a murder. Instead of like having the fire burn the building down, or having Baby lob his head off, okay? He should have had to suffer a Springlock failure just so that he could see how easy it would have been just to off Afton directly instead of trying to do it like a coward. And finally, in at number 1, Michael Afton. Michael Afton absolutely, in my mind, deserves to have gotten Springlocked instead of simply burning in FNAF 6, okay? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy, going after his father, but in reality, Michael, to me, he's just playing the hero this whole time and not actually doing anything. He says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but even Oliver Queen did more than that, okay? He's not doing it because he's a good person, he's doing it because he feels bad and not because of, like, some higher moral code. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which I mean is understandable, but then that subsequently means that anything he does to try and like fix the things that his father did is just to make himself feel better about his own mistakes. Because in the end, nothing is gonna bring his little bro back, okay? And he doesn't even really have the stomach to actually stop his father once and for all. He says that he's going to come find him, but then when he does in FNAF 6, he doesn't burn down the place to stop him, okay? Henry does that. Henry is the only one who's actually willing to sack up and try to stop William, even if he does it in a cowardly way, okay? That just shows how not serious Michael is. And if he really wanted to make sure that William was dead, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn, or at least doesn't actually successfully get out of the building so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother anymore, okay? Because he has the curse of knowledge, since he knows what his father was doing and he doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And you know what? That deserves a Springlocking. That's right. I don't care how mad at you are at me in the comments, okay? I don't care. It's true, alright? It's Monday morning, I'm mad.
Number 7. Kelsey is Crying Child / Cassidy. While Kelsey being Andrew could make some sense, others have speculated that the corpse found inside the suit actually belongs to Cece, Kelsey, crying child. This is obviously because of the physical description of the corpse, which has curly black hair. A lot of people coming back to that curly black hair for a lot of these theories. This description matches the appearance of crying child, who also appears to have black and curly or wavy hair based on what we see in the games. But Kelsey is blonde. How does he fit in? Well, it is possible that Kelsey is the amalgamated manifestation of both crying child and Cassidy, who perhaps both haunt Golden Freddy if in this continuity they were both victims and have decided to share possession of the animatronic. Neither of them of course was blonde, but they could be changing their appearance together, using a disguise to go out in the world and trick bullies into trusting them. Cassidy could also possibly be considered the more aggressive personality, while crying child could be considered the nicer side, and also might bring the masculine appearance to the table when it comes to their disguise. Because obviously Cassidy was a girl, so yeah.
And at 6, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all time, okay? We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sounds of multiple animatronics banging at his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know that he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories is that the animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of events for the Springlock suits is a little messy, since we don't really have the exact years for the things getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one, or maybe he tried to use it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just doesn't want us to know that yet or something, and what we hear could just be the FNAF 3 cutscene. I mean, I doubt it, but it would be absolutely hilarious if he ended up pulling that on us, okay? And for all those saying that Phone Guy can't be Afton because Afton is British or whatever, so is Tom Holland, okay? It's called acting. You can fake an accent, especially if you're a serial killer who's trying to evade everything, you know? Kinda, yeah, it's a thing.
Number 5. Yellow Suit. In FNAF 2 on night 6, Phone Guy's call reveals that he is surprised you came into work at the location, as it is meant to be shut down for a while. He tells you that there was an incident that happened involving the yellow suit in the back, which many have theorized to be the Springlock suit used in the missing children incident, where 5 victims went missing. Some even think that this phone call is referring to that incident. Phone Guy claims that someone wore the yellow suit, and ever since the animatronics have been acting strangely. Is it because they had victims stuffed into them, and possibly because those victims' souls are making the animatronics behave more aggressively because they're possessing them? I don't know, but it makes sense.
In at 4, the Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that was, is actually a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no real harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure would definitely provide enough power to do that, since, you know, the Springlocks themselves would snap with a ferocious velocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to actually crush a skull thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics ended up getting suspended, because now one of their own employees was bit and then they had to promote him and then fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So yeah, was the Bite of 87 a Springlock failure? Maybe. And was it the moment that caused the Springlock suits to be retired? I don't know. Okay, it also could have been the FNAF 4 bite. But considering the FNAF 3 phone calls, it actually seems to be this bite though, since in FNAF 2 we hear about someone using one of the yellow suits and not mentioning the Springlocks until FNAF 3, meaning that they were probably still in use normally come 1985, and Crying Child died in 1983, so it was probably the Bite of 87 that got them suspended, so there you go.
Number 3. Funtime Bonnie is a Springlock suit. Funtime Bonnie really only appears in Sister Location as an empty head, but what if there is something else going on with this animatronic? After all, there is one animatronic who we also don't get a good look at in the game, but who we are pretty familiar with by the end of it, just based on our experiences. That would be the Springlock animatronic that we are stuck in temporarily. While we never see it explicitly, we also never get to see Funtime Bonnie explicitly either. This has led some to theorize that Funtime Bonnie is said Springlock suit and is the older animatronic that Circus Baby was referring to. The only thing that seems odd is how new we'd imagine Funtime Bonnie to look, but then again, it's more likely that the animatronics at Sister Location are actually really old and have just been well maintained and possibly refurbished, and possibly, you know, hidden away there. After all, Circus Baby's Pizza World seems to be one of the first locations, I think. This timeline is hard to keep track of, so forgive me if I'm wrong about something that has not actually been confirmed. So I guess we can't really be wrong about much.
And finally, in at number 1, Double Trouble. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Springlock Bonnie suit that we see in FNAF 3? It is possible, okay, and it certainly appears like this could be the case in the FNAF novels. Well, it is the case in the FNAF novels, but because of that, it could be the case in the games. Since William in the books is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before actually becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason that the Springlock suits were actually retired? Since we do hear of the unfortunate incident at a sister location, so is that unfortunate incident instead William? There are plenty of people that it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, because you know, he's kind of up there, and I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about anyone else, so if they failed on them, why would he retire them? But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on after, you know, when like the room was wet in FNAF 3, this could be unlikely unless he just doesn't have the capacity for trauma, but it's still possible either way, okay? So since this list is about mysteries, I feel like this deserves to be on it. And you know what? Be the capstone.
Number 10. Springlock doors. Something that has come up multiple times over the course of all of these games, a question that still has yet to be answered, is how do the doors open if the power turns off, considering that they're mechanical doors? Well, what if the doors are actually spring-loaded and it's the power that holds them in place, and then when they turn off, they just snap upwards, I guess. The other strange thing in general about the doors is that they slide upwards, not sideways. That just means those straight looking sheets of metal are actually able to curl up somehow, being stored in the ceiling, like a garage door, although I don't think that's what's happening, or that there is a wall directly above for that door to slide into, which would be a lot of convenient wall stacking, especially if this is a one-level building, then it really doesn't make sense. Either way, I can only imagine that these doors would even be capable of springing open if it was the power alone keeping them shut, and that they are somehow spring-loaded to always be open, unless the power is on to push them down. That's the only way we can rationalize the way they work. Maybe this is also why our power runs out so fast as well. After all, I'm assuming it would take quite a bit of force and therefore power to keep them in place if they were spring-loaded. Number 9. Kelsey is Andrew. Kelsey is the new kid in one of the stories from Fazbear Frights, number 3, 1:35 AM. Coincidentally, I think one of my favorite books in the Fazbear Frights series. The story itself is also titled appropriately The New Kid. It centers around Kelsey, who is a new kid at school that everyone likes because he is so friendly and good looking. In the end, Kelsey ends up being betrayed by his new friends that he's made, who try to scare him by taking him to an abandoned Freddy's location and making him dance around in a Springlock Golden Freddy suit, which of course malfunctions, killing him. Later on, one of the friends comes back for Kelsey only to get stuck in the suit himself and see a corpse inside that doesn't seem to match Kelsey's appearance. This corpse is noted as having black curly hair, which led many fans of the books to speculate that Kelsey is in fact the vengeful spirit Andrew, who also appears in another story later on in the book series, The Man in Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book. In that story, the vengeful spirit, whom many believe to be Andrew, one of the spirits that possesses the Stitch Wraith, appears as a dark boy with curly hair wearing an alligator mask. With a description of his hair matching that of the corpse found inside the Springlock Golden Freddy suit, it's easy to see why people think Kelsey is Andrew. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about all of the Springlocks, so many Springlock things, so springy, so locky, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Plush Trap is from Sister Location. And what's more, might also be an older model Springlock suit? Based on what Circus Baby says about the Springlock suit we are stuck in coming from her old location, we could theorize that Plush Trap is also a Sister Location Springlock suit, especially since Plush Trap looks much older by comparison. But why do we think Plush Trap is also a Springlock suit? Well, it's interesting that in the book Fetch, we learn more about the Plush Trap animatronic, where it is implied that it can mimic the voices of other folks, something that prior to Fetch's release, only Sister Location animatronics seemed to be capable of. This is what makes us think that Plush Trap comes from Sister Location and perhaps was an older animatronic brought over from Circus Baby's previous location. While Plush Trap doesn't really fit in with the overall aesthetic of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, we do know that an older Springlock suit was also kept there. Does that that mean that Plushtrap is also an old Springlock that initially was its sister location, just based on the voice mimicking? If so, how did they get to be with the Nightmare animatronics? And also, who wore the Plushtrap suits if they were ever worn, if they were Springlocks in that way? Was it designed for a shorter employee or possibly for kids to wear? Also, just to be clear, I'm not implying that that is the Springlock suit that we are in Sister Location when you're playing the game, because yeah. I don't know how tall Michael Afton is, but I don't think he's as small as Plushtrap.
And at 7, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before the Silver Eye starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve a Springlock failure or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, finally actually, took care of his worst enemy, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms that's inside of her that she used to kill Henry. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time, or maybe the right suit at the right time for him. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, I mean, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately. I mean, it's true, it doesn't. Henry dying doesn't really mean much overall for the FNAF lore, okay? We didn't even know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just burning him alive.
Number 6, Shadow Freddy and RWQFSFASXC. I think I said that all right. This theory, I believe, has been debunked, so just a word to the wise about that, but I still thought it was a pretty cool theory that existed, and I personally like the sound of it. I think it's a neat theory, hence why I'm gonna share it here with you, even though it's been discredited. But just know, we know that. The theory posits that Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie were both victims of a Springlock failure. Phone Guy talks about the sister location experiencing multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, leading some fans to think that might explain the shadow animatronics we see and what exactly they are. Spirits who are attached to the suits that they died in, but were for some reason unable to fully possess them, instead becoming a shadow-like version of that animatronic. I just think it's a cool idea. I mean, shadow animatronics are so mysterious to me, so when I find cool stories that could explain how they work, their theories, I love them.
Halfway through at number 5, Crying Child. Okay, now this one is certainly going to get at least a little controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates of my Instagram DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram not asking about literally anything else aside from the bite of 83 and how it had to have been the Springlocks kind of bothers me, and it does so to my core, okay? I say it every time that I brought it up, but it couldn't have been a Springlock failure. That being said, though, if it is possible, I mean, that's kind of what this list is talking about, mysteries, who knows? The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning that no Springlocks would have had the chance to fail, since keeping in mind a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms used to move the robotic parts failing, meaning that all the actual endoskeleton bits snap back into where they should have been, and that's why if someone's inside, that's a bad thing, because you don't want to really be sharing your bone bits with metal bits. And there also would have been no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth because there's no robotic bits between the jaws. But again, that's the whole thing. The jaw just moves up and down. But still, it's a possibility since logic and physics doesn't really seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're supposed to be electromagnets, they would only open with power, I'm just saying, okay? Maybe Scott intended it to be a Springlock failure, but he just showed it in literally the worst way possible. I don't know.
Number 4, Bite of 83. We know that Fredbear was the one behind the Bite of 83 based on the minigames we see in FNAF 4, and we also know that CC was the victim of said bite and eventually died of his injuries. But what we don't know is why the bite happened. However, if you look deep into the lore surrounding Springlocks, it feels like a no-brainer here. Sorry, no pun intended, Crying Child. Sorry about that. We already know that Springlock failures have pretty much been an ongoing problem since the creation of the suits, and we also know that Springlock failures on a massive scale eventually got these kinds of suits retired. So what if the Bite of 83 was the major beginning of that? What if the bite happened because of a Springlock failure itself? All the clues seem to be pointing us in this direction. A technical issue is the only real explanation, as the animatronics themselves seem to have not been inherently malicious, not until they were bonded with spirits which lingered inside them, making them vengeful. And so if there wasn't a spirit in there, then we must assume there was a technical error, a Springlock malfunction.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Golden Fredbear. One theory I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure was mostly the start of FNAF 4 theory, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't actually move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true based on the characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night and not just coloring and size, since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have been, since, you know, Fredbear would have to accommodate a human and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since he would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then to Burn Trap, so honestly, it's all up in the air. However, I have yet to see proper substantial evidence of this being the case, and I don't think that they would have removed the endoskeleton before that.
Number 2, Springlock suits were designed to malfunction. You have to wonder, when you learn how easy it is for a suit to malfunction, if the suits themselves were ever actually made with the intention of functioning in a safe manner. It seems more likely that they were made with the intention to do harm. The Springlocks can malfunction if not wound up securely and properly before the wearer dons the suit. Not winding up the springs properly can result in them simply going back to their original position, impaling the wearer. The thing that I find very suspicious is how a small amount of moisture, such as that which comes from heavy breathing or even just moisture in the air, can cause the Springlocks to completely loosen. These are also suits that you'd think were intended for you to move around in, acting as the character you were dressed up as, and yet in Sister Location we are warned not to move too much, as this can actually set off the Springlocks, implying either the locks were not at all secure when the suit was put on us, or that they are so temperamental that basic movements could set them off, never mind jumping around, dancing, or in general performing as the character that you happen to be dressed as, which is what I'd assume would be expected normally of an employee donning a mascot suit. Number 1. Henry sabotaged the Springlock suits. We don't really have a lot of clearly defined lore from the games that lets us know who really made all of the animatronics between William and his business partner Henry. In some continuities, it's implied that William is more the inventive one, whereas in others, William is more business savvy and Henry is more robotic savvy. It could be possible that the two were actually a little bit of both. I think that makes the most sense just based on everything we've learned about them. If this is the case, who's to say that Henry wasn't the one behind the Springlocks, and perhaps after losing his daughter, sabotaged said Springlock suits while in a vengeful state. When William, however, did not die from Springlocks impaling him, Henry had to resort to other means later down the road, like what we see in Pizzeria Simulator, with him rounding up all of the former animatronics and then burning the place to the ground. Or potentially with Henry being behind the burning down of Fazbear Fright, which also was a suspicious thing that happened, and we don't really know who's behind it, but I feel like Henry could make sense there.